When it comes to paint protection film, there is some minor disassembly required. And on the Jaguar F-Type here, the vents on top of the hood, they have to be pulled off. They have grit underneath them, and we will be filming and sliding the film underneath those areas to give it a nice seamless look, a look that will give bystanders the illusion that there's no film on there. They would have to see edges in order to pick up that there's paint protection film on the panel. We're going to wrap all of the edges, and we're going to put film right underneath those vents, and then we'll put the vents right back on again. Welcome back to the channel, good friends. This is Brian from Apex Detail. We have a few hours to spare today, so we will jump back on the Jaguar F-Type. We're going to be wrapping it or applying PPF, paint protection film, bumper to bumper, front to back, full body. Paint protection film will guard against rock chips, stone chips, and scratches, and they do a much better job than any ceramic coating or graphene coating could ever do. I warmed up to it lately, seeing how important it is, especially with newer vehicles, having thinner, softer clear coat. I am a paint person, so I love just bare exposed paint with maybe a ceramic coating on it, or a sealant or a wax. And it took a while until I warmed up to the idea of having plastic, which is a form of plastic is PPF, on top of the painted surface. But today's paint protection film has a beautiful clarity to it, a nice smooth texture, and a wonderful job. We prefer STEK DYNOshield here at the shop. We have tried almost all of them, including some of the Chinese cheaper films that are available, and we chose STEK as our go-to, our staple. It has the perfect balance when it comes to adhesive, look, depth, protection, and just overall ease of application. I'll give a quick overview as to what we're doing, some of the tools we're using, the solutions that we're using. But at this point here with the hood, we have all of the solutions squeegeed out, and the film is adhered to the surface, and we just need to trim. This is called a bulk installation. When you have a huge clamshell hood here, it takes a larger roll. They sell it in all different sizes, 30, 48, 50 inches, 60 inches, 72 inches. So this piece that we used to protect the hood came off a roll that was 72 inches wide, and we did what they call a bulk installation. So we put a sheet, probably about a foot and a half longer than the hood itself, width and length, over the film, gave it a little bit of tension, a little bit of stretch, not too much, tacked it down, and now we're working on the edges. We leave about a 1/4 of an inch to a 1/2 an inch so we can wrap around the edges of the hood for a nice, clean, seamless install. Now, we can't do that with absolutely every part on this vehicle, but we do it for pretty much every panel we can: doors, hoods, trunk, anywhere where there's a lip that we can wrap it around. There is some minor disassembly as we're putting some of the pieces back on. You can really go down the rabbit hole. We don't. We pick and choose and are careful with our disassembly. Once a car is apart, especially with the newer crappy plastic clips that hold vehicles together, they never hold tight and are the same once you take a car apart. You can often get squeaks, and it's an overall thing that I wouldn't want my vehicle torn apart, and I take that into consideration when we are doing film. The panels that we do not bulk, we will use a pattern from what they call a plotter. And we have a plotter. If you want, just mention down in the comment section. I'll show mine to you and show you exactly how it works. But this lower part of the small fender here was done by cutting a pattern from a plotter. It's a program that you can download the patterns for each vehicle. Now that we're jumping on the roof here, this is going to be, they do make patterns for a roof, but this is going to be a bulk install. So we can cut to the exact length that we want, and we can wrap around. There's enough room to wrap the edges on just about all four sides. Once you find your tacking points on each panel, and that means where you're anchoring the film on corners and body lines, and just making sure the film fits right and has the right fitment, has the right stretch or the right pull, and all of the fingers are tensioned out of the film, then you can lay it down like glass. You can glass it just like this. You can use PPF or paint protection film to protect all smooth, hard surfaces on the inside or the outside of your vehicle, and that includes headlights, grills, trim, and taillights besides painted areas. And we're working on a headlight here on the F-Type, and this is a pattern. So it was pulled off the plotter. So if you're wondering why we keep spraying under the film, on top of the film, we spray first on the panel before we lay the film down so the film floats on top of the liquid. And normally it's going to be Johnson & Johnson's baby shampoo mixed with water. And that ratio depends on what film you're using, what type of adhesive it is. There's gloss film, there's satin film, there's cosmetic film, which is colored or pigmented. And each has a little slight tweak to the formula. And that floating film then gets squeegeed out with the little squeegee, the color squeegees that we have. Pink ones, all different color, pink, yellow, purple, black, all with different hardnesses, different shapes and sizes to lay down film on absolutely every panel. So once the film is in place and you tack a corner down, you can then squeegee out the liquid from underneath the film. Then the adhesive finally makes contact with the surface and it adheres, just like it has here. Fits perfectly, looks fantastic. Sometimes you might catch a hair or a fiber or even a dust nib underneath. You just use a little bit of hot water, spill it on top. It relaxes the adhesive so you can pull it back up, get the contaminant out of there, and then lay it back down. When I mention tack solution, to me that can mean two different things. When you want to flush out the slip solution, you can use just regular water, and that will in turn flush out the area so the adhesive can start to tack to the surface. You can also use a mixture of isopropyl alcohol. That really speeds up the process and gives a nice tight tack if you're pulling hard on the other end. You never really want to overstretch or pull film hard. Just pull it enough to get tension to remove fingers or get a better fitment on the panel. Mirrors can be some of the hardest areas to protect with film because of the shape of the panel, of the substrate. And you could do it two ways. You can bulk protect it with PPF, or you can use a pattern or a pre-cut like we have here. Depending on what type of car it is, we have and will continue to use both methods, bulk and the plotter, using a pre-cut. It's a case-by-case scenario. When it comes to plotters, we use a program called Core, which has patterns for different vehicles, and each program is different. There's DAT, there's Core, there's DigiCut. There's a few to choose from, and depending on your taste, like with Core, you can extend a pattern for a cut. That way you can wrap edges without having to do any trimming or do a bulk installation. So it just slightly blows up the surface area of the pattern for you, and you can overlap and wrap and tuck the edges. Right now, Brian's working fingers out of the film. What are they? Those are little areas the size of your finger that lift up. That's because the film is bunching up a little bit. To a certain extent, you can lay those down with no problem whatsoever. For the most part, you want to have enough tension on the film that there's no fingers whatsoever, but you will run into them here and there on some panels. No big deal, they will stay down. You will need to learn the film and read the film. It will tell you which way it wants to be pulled or stretched, if at all. If there are fingers that won't lay down, there's too much of the material bunched up and gathered into one area, and that needs to be tensioned out or pulled and stretched out slightly. And then it will finally stay down and relax for you. There are sometimes a car will come back and there's a little bit of a finger that lifts back up, and you can correct that. Most of the time, we will just replace the panel, but there are adhesive promoters which we are against and do not like to use, and there are other little tips and tricks to use to get film to act in a manner that you want it to. Sometimes there are little tiny air pockets or air bubbles or even moisture pockets or moisture bubbles. And if they are tiny moisture bubbles, the film's permeable. Sometimes those will go away on their own, but for the most part, they need to be removed. You need to overlap your squeegee technique. Take your time. You can't be in a rush, and just do it properly the first time so you never have to lift the film up or force moisture or air pockets from an area. When it comes to training, my guys have been to multiple courses, but really, there is nothing that compares to hand on experience and experience laying film on different types of vehicles, body lines, contours. It takes about a year or two to get comfortable. For most people, some pick it up quicker. Some people, it takes a little bit longer to pick it up. But with the new vehicles and the shapes that these vehicles are coming out, changing year by year, it's always going to be a learning process. If you are just starting out and want to get into film, be prepared to go through a bunch of film your first year. You can sometimes go through $10,000, $20,000, $30,000 worth of film the first year or two, just being picky and learning on the fly. Front and rear bumpers can also be a challenge depending on the vehicle. Sometimes the patterns will be cut just a little bit smaller than the actual bumper, so it gives you the incentive to stretch and give a little bit of tension on the film, and that will automatically remove fingers and give it a nice fitment if you have all of your tack points laid down properly. Everybody's way of going about this may be slightly different. My technique is slightly different from Brian across from me here, or my son Brian's technique. I like to do a small section at a time, wipe it down, make sure there's no dust nibs or contaminants or hair or fibers or moisture pockets or air pockets before moving on. Because if you catch it early, it's easy to remove them, lay the film back down without adhesive marks, which are a distortion in the film's adhesive that gives it an ugly look. With the finished result here, it's going to be hard for somebody to even tell this car has been filmed or protected with PPF bumper to bumper. It's impossible to do a perfect install with PPF, no matter what anybody says. I'm just laying it out on the line for you. But you can take your time, and I can also give you a tip not to go down the rabbit hole with perfection. You'll go through a lot of film. You need to communicate with your customer and give them reasonable expectations. Your life and your customer's life will be a lot easier. Film is not an extension of the beauty of your car unless it is a cosmetic film. It is made to protect and take abuse over the years and will start to look ugly in some areas as it takes the abuse. You can refresh film from time to time with PPF Renew and products like that, but for the most part, expectations need to be laid down with either yourself or your customer. If you have any questions, don't hesitate. This has been Brian from Apex Detail. Catch you in the next video.